Hi, Happy New Year. This is Monica, founder of Reparations Ed. Through Reparations Ed, I support teachers in advancing equity for Black students. So I am back with another video. I'm just coming off winter break. I had some time to do some self care, rest, and relax, and I hope you did too. So during that dead time, kind of between Christmas and New Year's, I was doing some reflecting about like my past teaching practices. And I was thinking about how one of the biggest gripes I hear from teachers is around student behavior. Now, I know that's not the biggest thing because, the biggest gripe to me would be teacher pay because teachers deserve to get paid. But that's another video. One of the biggest gripes I hear is about student behavior, especially since the pandemic, because we know that after the pandemic, students came back with some trauma, and we saw some of those behaviors increase, some of those negative behaviors in students and in adults as well. And there's always that one or two students, who just are a challenge. You find them challenging. It's hard to get through to them, or they're disruptive. Or maybe you're a teacher who has a classroom full of students that you find to be challenging. So, this video today is just about strategies that you can do, small things and small tweaks that you can do to improve this, to improve student behavior, make your classroom more manageable because, it's hard to teach when your classroom is chaotic or students are disruptive or disrespectful. So, this may seem cliche, but hear me out. So research has shown, you may already know this, that um, kids learn better from a teacher that they like. So like relationships do matter. It matters if the student likes you. And there's a researcher from New Zealand. He's a white man named John Hattie. And he's done a lot of research around education. You may have heard of him. And his research has shown that teachers have the teacher has the biggest impact on student achievement. So, with that being said, you may be thinking, well, how can I positively impact student achievement and get these kids to learn something when, I can't even get them to listen? So, that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. And one of the things that I want to share before we dive into is that really what all of this is about, the three things I'm going to talk about, what they're all about is building relationships. To me, that is the most important thing a teacher can do to improve student behavior and student achievement is to build those relationships. So, how do you do that? It doesn't come intuitively to a lot of folks. So, let's talk about it. A lot of what I'm sharing with you today, I actually got from the book Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. If you haven't read it, I mean, this is like a Bible. I used this a lot while coaching teachers, and it was very impactful. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. So the number one, and these aren't in any particular order. So the first strategy that I want to share with you is create a learning partnership. Okay, so what does that mean? Let me ask you a question. Do you have high expectations for your students? Or do you just expect the bare minimum and then get frustrated when they give you the bare minimum? Does that sound familiar? Because I know I did that when I was a teacher. I didn't have high expectations for a lot of the students who were struggling to meet standards or to achieve in my classroom. So Zaretta Hammond tells us we need to make students partners in the learning. We need to get away from this like top-down approach. And so to do that, we need to build the learning partnership. We need to make a learning pact between you and the students. Now, you can do this whole group, but I suggest you can talk about the learning pact and like why we're here. It's like building buy-in. What we're going to be doing, what you can expect, what I will do, what you would do. A lot of teachers do this at the beginning of the school year. But what we don't do is do it individually with each student. So I suggest you meet one-on-one with each and every student at least 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end, because you want to help give them a roadmap or game plan for their growth and their progress in your classroom. How can they know where they're going if they don't know where they've been, or if they don't see the goalpost, or if they don't even know why they're there? A lot of kids are just coming to school, but they don't know what they're learning and they don't know why. Students as young as kindergarten, and I used to be a kindergarten teacher, can understand this concept. When you have more buy-in from students, and when you build up a partnership rather than a top-down approach of just you telling them what to do, then you'll have more engagement. Okay, so when you have the learning partnership, you increase engagement. When you have more engagement, you have less disruption in your classroom. So the problem, if your students aren't listening to you, the problem could be that they're not engaged and they don't know why they're there and you don't have the buy-in. Another powerful thing mentioned in culturally responsive teaching in the brain is that you need to create power with the students rather than power over them. So if you're trying to be that authoritative, no nonsense teacher all the time and be serious, that doesn't work all the time, especially for Black students. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. All right, so the second strategy that I recommend, and that comes from the book, is about building trust and building trusting relationships. I'll call it that. So let me ask you a question. Do you know what your students are good at? Do you know what your students are good at? Or do you only know them by their academic challenges? Because I remember being in those data meetings and I just dropped my phone on the floor. Sorry, guys. I'm going to leave it there. I remember being in those data meetings and having those conversations where we would label students as struggling or at risk or low achieving and things like that. And we would always know the things that they needed to work on and what their challenges were. But we never really talked about their strengths or, how to utilize those strengths in the classroom. So you can build trust and relationships by getting to know your students better, whatever that looks like. Some teachers do it by having lunch with groups of students or having having those one-on-one conversations, in between time during passing periods or at lunch or whenever you can fit them in. Other teachers, there's lots of different ways I'm not going to sit here and give you a list of strategies for how to build relationships, I guess. I'm just saying that you need to get to know your students better. You need to get to know your students better. So think about how you can do that and what works for you, because every teacher's different. The way I built relationships with students was just by showing up, being authentic, sharing about myself, getting to know them. And I was really good with like those in between times, giving a smile, a nod, a touch on the shoulder, saying something positive that I liked that they did that day. So those are some of the little things that I did. You got to find your ways. And I want to also mention that for Black students especially, a lot of them and their families distrust institutions. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them, some of us, I should say, not them. I'm Black, so I'm going to put myself in that category. As Black people, we distrust institutions. The reasons are obvious because institutions have not treated us fairly across history and even today. And some Black students have a family member that's incarcerated, or they have had bad experiences in the education system. They haven't been treated fairly, and especially like middle and high school students. So when they come to your classroom, there may be some automatic distrust. So you're going to have to work harder to earn those students' trust. You earn their trust and respect. If you think just because you're the teacher and you walk in and they're supposed to automatically respect you, it doesn't work like that anymore. You have to earn it. Also, the last thing I'll say too is in the book, it talks about how Black students and Black culture across the African diaspora, we tend to be relational people. We thrive off relationships. We're community centric. We like working together. And that is directly opposite of American culture, which is highly individualistic. So keep that in mind when you're working with Black students, Latin students, students from some Asian backgrounds. They're not used to individual achievement. It's hard for them to sit down and do independent work because that's what we want in America. But why can't they, so think about some ways that they could collaborate and build relationships with each other and with you. All right. So the third strategy that I want to share with you is the warm demander. Are you a warm demander? So what does that look like? You may have heard that before. So a warm demanders combine care and warmth with those high expectations that we spoke about earlier. Warm demanders intentionally build relationships with each student. Remember those learning pack meetings that I suggested you have? That's a time to start building those relationships, but not the only time. Warm demanders have their actions and their body language communicate warmth, but also authority. Now, this isn't that no nonsense teacher, that authority figure, do as I say type of teacher that demands, for students to behave or to do this or that. Because remember, that approach does not always work with Black students because of the distrust that's there. And just because of that is not a relational, action to be authoritative. And we want to build this up as a partnership, not a top-down approach. So this teacher would earn the respect of students. And also, warm demanders have high standards and high expectations and don't save the students. They don't try to save the students from any challenge. They don't swoop in and save the day when it gets hard. They let students have that productive struggle. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. Just try again. Try it this way. They don't swoop in with the right answers. They help students welcome that productive struggle. And they have a classroom culture that welcomes that and that tells them that it's okay to make mistakes. So you'll get students who want to try for you, try harder. So the warm demander is liked by the students, but they're not trying to be friends, So it's just that balance, the warmth and the care, but also the high expectations of, I know you can do this work and you're going to do it. We're going to do it together. I'm your ally. That's what a warm demander is. So those are my 3 strategies, having the high expectations and creating that learning partnership, and then building trusting relationships. That was the second one. And then the third one was being a warm demander. So thank you so much for being here. And I would love for you to like, subscribe, and share this video with anybody who you think it will help. Let's keep this conversation going.